Good morning, fans of alternative archaeology. I'm not sure why you call it alternative archaeology. If it was good archaeology, if it was scientific archaeology, we would just call it archaeology. Is that like alternative facts? I don't know. Anyway, what I'm going to respond to today, after my squaring the circle video, I got some comments. This is by Bright Insight. It says, fair enough, but the context, and he's talking about the context of Graham Hancock's talking about these earthworks where they're squaring the circle, which they weren't actually squaring the circle, they were drawing a circle, or drawing a square around a circle. Fair enough, but the context was alignments to true north, in caps. And Polaris was not in the section of sky at that time, or time of Göbekli Tepe. Explain that. And blah, 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 blah. And he criticizes me for having discussed a point made by Graham Hancock without reading the book. I was just responding to what Graham Hancock said on video. The book is on order. I will read the book. Don't worry. This point about true north being a very difficult thing to find, you see that repeated over and over and over again. And I'm going to go to one of this guy's videos in particular, and let's take a quick look at that first. Okay, so here is Mr. Bright Insight, who is going to tell us about Göbekli Tepe.
Now, what's particularly interesting about this site isn't just the fact...
I like how he's got his fedora and his world map there. Here we go.
...that it's the world's oldest and largest megalithic structure, but the fact that it's the first building or structure to ever align perfectly north and south.
First building or structure to ever align perfectly north and south.
Not just in the direction of north and south, but perfect. Now, first of all, that's obviously not an accident when you consider just how incredible this site is. That there's 20 to 50 ton pillars that clearly have a celestial meaning to them. However, one of the key pieces of information about Göbekli Tepe is that you could not possibly construct a perfectly north-south facing structure without having advanced astronomical knowledge.
Let's play that part again.
Not possibly construct a perfectly north-south facing structure without having advanced astronomical knowledge.
You cannot possibly construct a perfectly north-south facing structure without having advanced astronomical knowledge. Got it? That's a Göbekli Tepe talking point. I don't know where that comes from, but I want to play you what Graham Hancock says about Göbekli Tepe, which I'm pretty sure is where this guy is getting it from directly. Okay, Graham Hancock on Göbekli Tepe.
To create the world's first perfectly north-south aligned building, which involves accurate astronomy, to do.
So there you go. First perfectly north-south aligned building, which requires accurate astronomy. Now, this is a map. Let me get you right in here. So that is a map of Göbekli Tepe. These are the kind of elliptical structures. These are the central T-shaped pillars. Here's your north arrow, right there. Not only are these not aligned, I'm not sure what the perfect north-south alignment is supposed to be. These are all going a little bit west, so they're north-northwest, and they actually look to me like they're all going different directions. So there are kind of two things here. One, Göbekli Tepe aligned straight north-south. Doesn't look like it to me. The second issue is, even if it was aligned straight north-south or any site, how difficult is that actually for people to do? What kind of technology or mathematical or astronomical knowledge is necessary to do that? It's actually not surprising to me at all that people whose livelihoods and lives are directly connected to being able to understand what's going on with the seasons of the earth in terms of plants, animals, climate, that sort of thing, that they would have a very nuanced and kind of very practical knowledge of how the sun tracks back and forth across the horizon over the course of the year, how the days get longer, the days get shorter. There's one day in between the longest and shortest day where the night and the day are exactly the same length, and that day is called the equinox, and that is where the sun rises directly east and sets directly west all around the world, all at the same day. Here, I'm going to get out my scrap paper of science again. Let me find it. let me go get a Sharpie. All right, here you go. Pretend this is your horizon. You are standing here. You can observe the sunrise somewhere along this horizon. If you stay in the same place all year round, what you will notice is that in the winter, the sun rises farther south. In the summer, the sun rises farther north. Those are your those points of maximum north and south movement of the sun on the horizon. Those are your solstice days. You can determine them very, very easily. If you have a fixed observation point here, I'm going to stand on this rock every day, look and see where the sun rises. I'm going to send my friend out, and he's going to put a stick in the ground. I'm going to, from this alignment point, I'm going to tell him to move, and the sun is going to rise there. The next day, he's going to put a stick in the ground. The next day, he's going to move the stick. Eventually, you'll get over here to the solstice. The days are very short, and the sun will start to move back this direction again. So you have found the farthest south point where the sun rises. You keep doing that, you know, and he's moving, and then, hey, here comes summer. Eventually, you get up here. That is going to be your summer solstice. This was your winter solstice. Shortest day, longest day. Here on the summer solstice, sun is rising north of east. It's still arcing across the sky in a kind of southward pattern, but it's spending a lot of time in the sky because of that long arc, and that's why the days are long. In between those two, there will be a point where the sun rises directly east. That is the equinox. On that day, if you stick a stick in the ground anywhere here, it's going to make a straight east-west line, like so. This will be east, this will be west. And that line won't change. It won't kind of rotate or arc through like it does when the sun is at an angle. So it'll start off very long, it'll shrink up to your stick in the ground, and then as the sun passes noon, there'll be no shadow right there, and then it'll start to get longer. So the best time to find east-west, and therefore true north, is on one of the two equinoxes. It is, what is it? It's May 1st today, so the next equinox will be in September. So we are moving toward the summer solstice, and the sun's got to come back again. So there's a while before I can demonstrate that. That's why I'm having multiple parts to this important series about the mystery of finding true north. You can still get pretty close by observing the shadows of the sun really on any day. And that's what I tried to do over the weekend in my own backyard. So day one, I experimented with different things for casting a shadow, and I observed my yard to see where I could possibly put something. You know, we've got trees and that sort of thing, where I could possibly put something where I could get a reasonably long arc of observations throughout the day. So how much high technology does it take to get a pretty good read on true north? All right, here's my first key piece of technology. It is a fixed point. It's going to cast a shadow. Whoops, I'll move my shadow out of the way, and there you can see it. I'm going to duct tape. Oh, that'll fit in there really nicely. I'm going to make a finer tip here with this Phillips screwdriver. Somebody's going to comment and tell me that the Phillips screwdriver wasn't invented at the time of Göbekli Tepe. All right, here is my fixed point here. I think the main challenge in this experiment is going to be to keep my kids from bumping the fixed point. All this has to do is sit here and cast a shadow. Here's the shadow. So this is where we're going to start. You can see this is, the light is being filtered through the leaves, so it's not super sharp. So I'm going to call, oh, there's another kid. Hey, I think I'm going to call it, let's see, does it go all the way to there? I'm going to call that the point. It's not ideal because of the way the light is coming through the trees. Another tribute to the ancients, I'm going to drink a beer and have some tater tots while I do the hard work of watching this shadow move across the concrete. I ended up doing this 4 different times. The first time in the morning I only got 2 points because of the diffuse light that was coming through. I tried it out on the concrete. It was much easier to see the sharp shadows. It's easier to see the shadows when you make your pole shorter. None of the lines that were produced by doing this, by tracking those shadows, were straight or parallel with one another, because during the day the sun inscribes an arc. So I was kind of sampling different parts of that So none of them would give me a true east-west line. Let's try a different tack here than yesterday. Having observed my driveway, I know where there's a lot of sun and shadow at what time, so I put a piece of rebar here. It's taller than me, so it's maybe, I don't know, 8 or 9 feet tall. It's going to cast a shadow over there. Hopefully I'll be able to see it, and then by the end of the day it's going to cast a shadow all over there. So I'm going to try to get a nice long series of points here. So this time lapse shows, it doesn't show much of anything, but it's about 9 hours worth of observation from 8:30 in the morning to 5:30 in the afternoon. I use little metal stakes with some pieces of paper to be able to see the shadow better in the grass, and you can kind of start to see the arc that it's outlining. So I measured the distance between my stick and this point right here, which is before noon. I'm going to make sure I put a peg in when the shadow is the same length, which is going to be somewhere over here in this neighborhood. That should be an east-west line that is perhaps as accurate as I'm going to be able to get it by doing it the way I'm doing it this time of year. Okay, here are my observations. I started this morning at about 8:38. It's now about 5:38, so 9 hours of observing the sun and putting in some incremental marks here of the shadow. It's making an arc, which shows you that there are many, many places along this line that, if you assume one is east and the other is west, are not going to give you true north. This is because we are not very near the equinox, so it kind of scribes an arcuate path across the ground. When we get closer to the fall equinox, again in September, it should give you pretty much a straight east-west line. I did a couple things to try to figure out true north here. One, I measured the distance of the shadow from my stick to that point, and then I put a point in the ground over here when the shadow was the same length. So theoretically, a line from that point to that one over there should be approximately true north. I did miss it a little bit in time. Same is true of this one. This point right here matches my X on the concrete in terms of shadow distance, shadow length from my rod. So that should also be true north, or pretty close. So those two lines should be parallel. Let's see, if we line ourselves up here on what north actually should be, somewhere along this line, you'll notice that the first point I made out there is south of my east-west line. That makes sense because we are past the spring equinox, which means that the sun is rising now in the north, so it's casting its earlier shadows to the south. The sun still travels kind of in a southerly arc across the sky, so as it arcs southward, it traces out this arcing path here. The distortion in the arc gets worse when you are farther away, which is an interesting observation. So, you know, you see people talk about this kind of survival technique of getting 2 points 10 or 15 minutes apart as an east-west line and then getting your north bearing off of that. If you did that first thing in the morning way out here with this first segment, you're headed in totally the wrong direction. Same is true if you do it in the evening. Another thing that's worth pointing out is, you know, a longer section of line here is going to give you kind of a truer east-west line to kind of, you know, run out and make a baseline from. But the taller your pole is, the more diffuse the shadow is at the end. So you can get a much sharper shadow when your shadow is shorter. But you have to wait a long time here to get a really short length. So there's some trade-offs. I think that ancient people would have figured this out pretty quickly. If this were the equinox, all of these points would be right in line with the shadow that was being cast by the rod. I could put another rod in that shadow and cast, and I could make a whole east-west line all day long from here as far as I wanted to, and get it pretty close to true north, I think, with minimal error. So I think the thing to do is see if I can figure out how close to true north I'm getting with these points, and I know there are going to be inaccuracies because of time and other things, the diffuse shadow and that sort of stuff. And then I can kind of measure the amount of, over the course of my arc, I could measure this entire distance and see what this distance is out from it, kind of I forget what the technical term would be, the height of the arc or whatever. And as we get farther away from the equinox into the summer solstice, that distortion should keep getting greater. Then when we hit the summer solstice, we should be at our kind of maximum distortion, worst time to try to find true north perhaps, and then it'll start moving its way back again to when we get back to the equinox, we've got our nice straight line. Brought home a tape measure and a tuning pin. I'm going to measure the distance along this arc here, where the shadow was an equal length from my stick to that point, from the stick out to that point there. I'm going to take some notes and then try to get in about a month and see how far the deviation is then. It should have increased. So we've got 4.52 meters there. Pull the tape so it's a little bit tight, like it's going right by. Yeah, keep it like right like that, okay?
That's 52.
Just gonna measure this. About 30.
Aaliyah, are you helping Daddy with that? Yeah.
So to do a kind of quick and dirty check on how close I got to finding true north, this is a Google Earth image of my backyard. It's grainy when you zoom in, but this is the driveway here. So this is where I did my experiment. I took a picture down. Here's the picture from a second story window. There it is. I'll get down here a little bit. Looking down at the line here, which I've highlighted in red. So that's what I think should be east-west. Obviously we've got different perspectives, but to try to get some idea of what was going on, you can kind of see that corner of the driveway and that side. That would be that right there. This is the garage hidden under trees. This is the side of the yard, and that right there is that corner. This is an old picture, so we now have garden there. So anyway, and then I just kind of took these lines, pasted them on there, and used distortion to try to get them to line up. And that's what I get. So the Google Maps is aligned so that north is top, so east-west. So that line is not perfectly, you kind of see if I click on it here. If I were to draw a perfect east-west line on here, I could just draw a rectangle, and that would be east-west. So that is off kilter by, I don't know, a degree or so, something like that. But given what I'm working with, that I can't even really find the right places on the photo, it's telling you that basically this is giving me east-west, on a day in the middle of the year without the equinox. So I think there's some error coming in from both this method, and obviously this is probably not 100% accurate, but it's pretty doggone close. Pretty simple thing to do. It takes one day of observation, and you can get pretty close. You could do it several days in a row and get closer. So there you go. And obviously on the equinox you have the ultimate check to give you east-west. The irony, of course, is that people like Graham Hancock and his followers wax about how ancient people were so much more in touch with the natural world than we are today, and I agree with that. I think they almost certainly were. That's not all people today, but those of us who, you know, work inside most of the day, live in cities, that sort of thing. We don't see the stars. We don't experience the kind of seasonal rhythms in the same way you do if you do work outside. If you're a farmer or a hunter-gatherer or whatever. So I agree with that part of it, but the irony is that realizing that, you still don't give ancient peoples, or really any people who experience the world in a different way, like credit for being able to figure out or realize even the most basic things about their environment. You know, if understanding the seasons and how they're linked to the movement of the sun is not basic, I don't know what is. It is an absolutely absurd notion that ancient peoples could not figure out or recognize true north without taking an astronomy class. Their lives were connected every day to what was going on with the seasons and the sun and that sort of thing. And I would bet you that every hunter-gatherer on the planet has understood that. Marking true north, or kind of inscribing that knowledge on the landscape with earthworks or with stone alignments or things like that, seems to be a very natural thing to do once you are in one spot. It's easier to make observations, I think, and to kind of pin things down, and then it's much easier to put those into some kind of form where that knowledge is made concrete, let's say. So if you don't think it's possible to find true north with some degree of accuracy, I challenge you to A, do what I did on any day of the year, and make some observations and try to get to understand how that works. And then go out on the equinox. Take a stick in the ground, watch it for about 6 hours, and see what happens. And see if you get it. Good luck. And I don't want to set myself up for too many commitments here, but the Atlantis destroyed by a comet thing, that's coming. The channeled scablands, that's coming. I've gotten into listening to some stuff about the rock wall in Texas. That's probably coming. I'm going to have a good time this summer, but I'm going to, I think, keep churning away at some of this stuff. You guys want engagement, so I'm going to engage. I'm going to try to be polite. I won't always be 100% successful, but I'm going to give it a shot. Thanks for watching.